discuss Brandon Lawson. There's some updates earlier in the 2022 around February. There was some discovery of articles of clothing. His Nike Air Max, his camouflage shorts, which was of the MMA style, which was exactly what he was wearing the night he went missing. They found those in February of 2022, and then roughly with a few hundred yards of his articles of clothing, they found skeletal remains. That's more than likely, almost with certainty that it is the remains of Brandon Lawson. They are awaiting DNA confirmation, which we still have not gotten information on, which I don't know why. I know it takes months, but we're close approaching a year now. But in any case, the Texas Rangers are pretty certain it's Brandon Lawson, and his family has also confirmed it is most likely. With 100% certainty, Brandon Lawson's remains. This was a case that got a lot of attention, especially on the online with the web sleuths and the true crime genre. The circumstances surrounding it was, confusing. I wouldn't say mysterious, but a lot of people did, classify as mysterious, and there was a lot of effort to figure out what happened to Brandon that night he went missing, the night he ran out of gas, etc. And it really stemmed from the 911 call. The 911 call, first of all, I think, and I thought from the time I heard it first time, was it was unhelpful. It wasn't, there wasn't really any good information in there, though people went to great lengths to try to squeeze that juice. They were trying to interpret what Brandon was saying. They were trying to speak for Brandon when clearly Brandon wasn't really able to speak for himself. His speech was slurred. He was laboring to make a clear, coherent thought. He had a lot of kind of bizarre things to say about a scraper, pushing cars off the road. He was being pursued, but it was a lot of disjointed thoughts. It was not clear. He did request help from the cops, that he was in the field, and he was bleeding, etc. And it just doesn't make a lot of sense. But if someone's under duress, they can communicate clearly about the circumstances, surrounding their situation, and he just wasn't quite able to do that. And this did not deter a lot of the online sleuths to go in there and like I said, speak for him. You had some guys, some sound engineer guys, they were subduing the background noise to draw out Brandon's voice, to see if there was a second person with him while he was making that 911 call. Some said there were, but there wasn't. And then some people said they heard a gunshot. There wasn't. It just sounds like maybe some noise. It could have. It had nothing to do with actual, the physical world. It could have simply been, the recording itself. How it's processed. There were people, subduing his voice and bringing out background noise, and there was just a lot of wild theories. And you really have to want to believe, a grander chain of events to believe that 911 call, proved that Brandon wasn't alone that night, etc. And there just really wasn't anything in that 911 call that was useful whatsoever. As we know, Brandon went missing August 9th, 2013. He comes home at around 11:30 p.m. Has a little, a fight with his longtime girlfriend or common law wife, whom he had 3 children with. They have a fight because he hasn't been home. This is one of the things that's not really mentioned a lot. As we know, Brandon, as I said, went missing August 9th. Well, Brandon hadn't really been home before he arrived at 11:30 p.m. to his residence. He hadn't been home in almost 30 hours. And there's reasons as to why. So he was already missing. He was only seen for approximately 30 minutes. He relapsed on meth. This is coming from his brother. It's coming from his common law wife. And he even reached out to his brother the day before or day and a half actually before he went missing, that he wanted to get in contact with a drug dealer, and which his brother supplied a number, and he went missing. Right, so he's gone all of that day, all of that night, all the entire next day until 11:30 p.m. Is when he drove off. He was supposed to go to his dad's, which was about 3.5, 4 hours away. But along the way, he lost gas on here on Route 277. There's a picnic area down here. This is where he ran out of gas in between these two roads, as you can see. And he made contact with his brother to tell him to come assist him, that he ran out of gas. So his brother makes preparations, gets a gas can, fills it up with gas, and drives to Brandon's location. But in the meantime, Brandon has made a series of 911 calls, trying to explain that, I guess he's in some sort of danger. Then a pickup or a semi truck comes by, sees that Brandon's truck is haphazardly parked. He makes a 911 call, whom the 911 dispatcher reaches out to a sheriff's deputy who is in Bronte, Texas, which is about 3 miles north of here across this bridge. So 3 miles up the road is Bronte, Texas. And we'll get into that in just a second. So the sheriff's deputy comes, tries to survey the area, trying to see if there's a stranded motorist, somebody walking along the highway. He sees nobody, but he pulls up to Brandon's truck, and then at which point Brandon's brother Kyle is also there. Now, this is post not the 911 call. Brandon is talking to his brother while the cop is there, and he says, "One time, run." One time being slang for cop. So we're already at some sort of contradictions here in the state of mind that Brandon's at. He had called in the 911 and asked for cops to come. So the cops show up, but Brandon won't come out. In fact, he's encouraging his brother to run. Now, there is some theories as to Brandon had a felony out for him at the moment. I think he had a warrant, actually a felony warrant, because he was in possession of methamphetamines with the intent to deliver. So maybe he didn't want to come out to the cops because he was afraid of that warrant. Well, you have other people who say, well, that doesn't make sense because he asked for the cops. So if he asked for the cops show up, but he doesn't come out. That means that Brandon isn't able to because somebody's, has him, at gunpoint or something, or he's captured or whatever the stories were. But that none of that makes sense because there's no other vehicles on the road. There's no signs of vehicles on the road. There's no skid marks. There's no blood in Brandon's truck. Nothing signifies that Brandon's out there with anybody else but himself. In fact, as he's talking to his brother, he's telling him, "I can see you," and he's sitting down below a tree, which they did discover the next morning that there was indentions in the ground, depression in the ground, where somebody had sit and could see the highway. So we can already mark that off that Brandon is not with anyone. Brandon is totally alone. So the cop and the brother have a conversation. They both go looking for Brandon, calling out for him. He will not come out. But I think they do have Kyle does talk to Brandon like one more time through the phone. They were able to reach each other. And then at some point, every time they try to call Brandon at 1:30 a.m., it just keeps ringing and ringing. And then around 4 a.m., it just goes to voicemail. So we can assume that his phone died, ran out of juice, because we know that he took a charger from the house, from his house, before he left. So he was trying to charge his phone up. He probably had some juice in his phone because from a 20-minute drive up the road, he got a little power. But it looks like his phone died at some point in the early morning hours. So secondly, the question being, some people are saying that Brandon did not relapse on drugs. It's impossible because he had just passed a drug test because he was getting ready to take a new job. I think it was starting Monday. This was the weekend. And why would somebody stay clean, pass a drug test, and then relapse and get back on drugs that weekend? That doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable or logical. Well, it makes perfect sense, and it's reasonable and logical if you're a suffering addict. There was no threat. There was no risk. Once you pass the drug test, what else do you have to fear? So the pressure was off. He passed the drug test, so then he went out and celebrated or relapsed. And we know he was gone for a long time. So it's clearly that Brandon was on drugs. That is a certainty. That's coming from his own family members. And then he was likely on meth, which was his drug of choice, from what I can understand, mixed with probably, likely alcohol. So yes, it makes sense that Brandon was on drugs, and this was about drugs. but you like again though, you had guys that it almost tried to shame people for even bringing up the drug scenario, but it's a factor when you look into these kind of cases. What are the motivating factors? What could lead Brandon to be irrational and leave in the middle of the night to go drive 4 hours away? Why didn't he stay home? Why did he feel like he was somebody was pursuing him? He said there was Mexicans chasing him out of town. They were following him, etc. But there was no indication. There's no proof of any of that. He was paranoid. He was hallucinating. He was in psychosis. He probably hadn't slept in that amount of time, 30 or 40 hours. We're up to the point 40 by the time we're getting into the early morning hours. He probably hadn't eaten that well because meth, that's what you do. You don't hydrate. You don't take care of yourself. So that's the quick summary here. But what we have is the original search grid. This is the areas they searched. This was all private property, I'm assuming on both sides of the highway. So this is the area they used cadaver dogs, drones, and volunteer search parties. This area up here was not searched. Now, we know through phone conversations that he said, he told his brother at one point during their communications, I'm about 10 minutes up the road. This is only a mile. So if we go here and look, from his truck to this bridge is not even a mile. We can call it roughly a mile. So you can see here that we're not even a mile from Brandon's truck. In any case, if we go all the way out here, which likely the search area was over here in this farmland. So this is probably a little short. This was just me eyeballing it. And we go up to the Colorado River. So they stayed within the Colorado River, basically. And I think from their cell phone towers, they were able to get some general location, which was northeast of his truck, which is where we are here. I have this highlighted because I think that's where they likely found the body or the remains. I say that they never really found the body, they found the remains because it makes sense. It lines up. He was at northeast of his pickup. This was the area they did not search, which brings us to the conclusion here. How was he unable to improve his situation? This is something anyone should be able to walk out of. If you're hiding from the cops, that's one thing, okay? But not to come out of this field once the cops leave and your brother leaves, and not to go put gas back in your truck, or just simply wait it out till the morning, or when the sun comes up, you walk out to the highway, you go to your truck. But they actually towed it by mid-morning hours. But he had time. There was a window of time here where he could have come out and walked into civilization, so to speak, walked up to Bronte. Again, Bronte being just a little hike, just up the road. There's Bronte, Texas. Here's his truck. This is not out in the wilderness. But he didn't. He did not. He walked into this field and literally vanished. There were some theories about wild hogs and feral hogs that killed him. That's garbage as well. The feral hogs aren't grizzly bears. They don't go and hunt human flesh. They don't hunt you down in the middle of the night. They avoid you. And again, this isn't exactly the wild wilderness. Though it is rural, you can see that it's cultivated. There's signs of people here. I'm not saying that there's not hogs on this land, but they're not going to hunt you down and kill you like a pack of grizzlies or something. That's just nonsense. They're more the rooter type. They get out and they root in the ground and they eat grub and whatever else they can get their hands on. The rattlesnakes, again, they don't hunt humans. If you step on one or get within the vicinity of one, yes, they can bite you. If you don't seek medical attention, there's a chance you could die. Same with mesquite and cactuses. Also, the river scenario here, Colorado River. Some people said he surmised that he drowned in it. That's not true. The Colorado River here is really a muddy ditch. Especially there in August of 2013, there was a major drought. The Colorado River was 6 inches to a foot deep, and it wasn't very wide at all. So all of those theories kind of went out the window. The cops were not involved. They were saying that there was dirty cops and a drug deal, and Brandon showed up at the wrong place at the wrong time. That he was, or that he was being pursued, or he found something he shouldn't have found in the middle of the night out here in this world. None of that's true. They also said the property owner likely killed him and buried him out there. That's why that they didn't want him. That's why they didn't want them searching these areas. Immediately after his death, around 2013 or so, in 2014. Though that was strange and it was unfortunate that the property owner wouldn't let people on his land to search for the body. Come to find out, I guess there was some concern over somebody getting hurt out there and suing him. He didn't want a bunch of people walk around his land. That property has since changed hands, so they have a new owner. They reached out to the owner. The owner had never even heard of Brandon's case. Once they pleaded and lobbied for him to, let him come on their land, he said, absolutely, do what you got to do. By all means, if I can help, I'll help. Well, that was the case. That's what cracked it. They had an idea about where he was at, and the property owner allowed them on it. And sure enough, they found Brandon, or the remains, his clothing, and some of his bones and skeletal remains. So they found Brandon. Barring a confirmation from the DNA results, we're just kind of assuming with some high probability that it is indeed Brandon. So Brandon was unable to walk out of this area. It's just baffling to me. That's the things that's troubling the most to me. He was unable to improve the situation. There's probably reasons as to why. If, like we said, Brandon goes back to Brandon being missing for 30 hours. Up to this point, now it's 40 hours. If he was heavy on meth, if he went on a hard binge, who knows what it was mixed with. It could have been fentanyl. There could have been some things in there that impacted Brandon's health. The mixture of alcohol likely dehydrated him, especially if he's not replenishing himself with food and water, and which it's very likely he did not if he's doing meth. He got out here in a heightened state of panic and agitation. He was probably wandering around in this field. He was probably walking in circles. When people get disoriented, that's what they do. You can see guys or folks who have been lost in the past. Their GPS tracker shows them making some real irrational decisions. They can't seem to get their bearings, and they tend to walk in circles without knowing they're walking in circles. They think they're walking in a straight line for miles, and really they're just making within a less than a mile circle, and it gets them all out of whack. But Brandon had some good helpful aids here. He had a river running north and east of him that he could have walked up to, heard the water, seen the water, got his bearings, and knew that the highway was facing his west. He could have probably heard cars passing. And though it was rural, there would be some traffic coming by, especially as the sun come up the next day. There would be people going about their business. He could have heard the thumping and the echoing off the bridge that's right here. There were some, indicators for him to walk towards civilization. He did not do that. He got out in this field, and that's the last thing we've ever seen of him or got to know about where locations. So what we can surmise based off this is Brandon likely collapsed at some point in the morning hours. And perhaps he went into cardiac arrest. Maybe he literally OD'd, and he OD'd and died out there in that field. Perhaps he was in such a poor state of health by this point, when the sun did come out, he was really unable to help himself. And then as the heat set on, he was already probably dehydrated. He was already depleted. And then within a few hours of the heat, that would get anywhere from 105 degrees to 112 degrees during this August time with very little shade, it's likely that Brandon didn't live too many more hours after he talked to his brother. I don't think he lived much longer into the day if he wasn't already dead, because it's simple that he would have walked out of there if not. Anybody in that situation that wasn't handicapped or hurt could have improved their situation. Again, we're talking less than a mile out of this field back onto the highway and just 3 miles north of Bronte, Texas, or back to his truck. He was unable to do that, which tells us he was probably at a state to where he was already dead or simply waiting to die. So that's the update on Brandon's case. Again, this is not a mysterious case, especially using Occam's razor. This was something that can probably be easy. Well, I say probably. It's easily explained, especially in hindsight now that more of this stuff is coming out. There was a lot of well-meaning people that covered this case trying to shed light on it, but unfortunately they did a lot of unhelpful things. They were, you go look at that family's Facebook page and there's people taking shots of Google Earth and sending them screen captures so they think they found his body on Google Earth. You can't do that. I mean, you could, but they're just showing like little objects, and they got these wild theories and they're just posting them. And this family's having to read all this, and it's just totally unhelpful when really if you look at what we know preceding the time in which he went missing, the drugs being a motivating factor, the 911 call sort of proving that it wasn't as crazy theories, these conspiracy theories that people coming up with, but really it gives you a glimpse in the state of Brandon's mind and his erratic, irrational behavior, likely a drug-induced psychosis, meth being particularly one of those, which is it does fuel paranoia, even and hallucinations. So, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments section. If not, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.